Eta. This is arguably one of the most common and most recognizable Basque words. And it's super simple. Hi, I'm Shanna, and this is Basque Physics. Even though eta is pretty straightforward by itself, it has been known to cause some confusion in the Basque language. It doesn't always translate as the word and in some situations, but we'll go over those. You'll hear the word eta often enough, and you'll see it written that way too, but more often you might hear it as just ta, and you'll see it written with or without an apostrophe in place of the e. This really happens a lot, and you'll see it at the beginning of sentences, between clauses and words, and even merging with a word or two and changing the entire sound of both words. For example, instead of beinjeta berris, you might hear beinta berris. Instead of eta orain, you might hear taurain. Instead of gau eta egun, you might hear gautegun. Instead of eta itxasoa, you might hear taitxasoa. Instead of eta abar, you'll hear etabar. Etabar is one you'll hear a lot, and it's often at the end of lists to mean etc. You may often see the phrase baita ere. This is a contraction of bai and eta to affirm the and. The phrase using baita almost always ends in ere, meaning also. So baita suri ere means and to you too. Opposite this is esta ere, es eta ere. So esta suri ere means and also not to you. You'll usually see eta in numbers after words that end in oge, 20, eun, 100, and mila, 1000. Ogeita bat, 21. Berrogeita lau, 44. Irugeita iru, 63. Eunta lau, 104. Miljata berreun, 1200. Eta may show up in some phrases, and this doesn't really mean and, but instead it just kind of intensifies the phrase. Examples are baisik or baisiketa, balin or balineta, nice or naiseta, edoeta, which usually contracts into edota, and several more phrases. Occasionally, you'll see eta at the end of sentences or right after synthetic verbs, and this also doesn't mean and. Rather, this translates as something more like because, or since, or for. In other words, it indicates that something is a speculation or an explanation for something else. Oeratu koda nekatuta dagoeta. He is going to bed since he is tired. Isilik nago es duzu kasurik egingoeta. I am quiet because you won't pay attention to me. Istripubat egon bearisanda errepidea itxita dagoeta. There must have been an accident, for the road is closed. So really, you just have to make sure you don't confuse because eta and eta. You have to make sure to read the whole sentence, especially longer, complicated, or broken up ones, to make sure that something really means and or since. For example, in the sentence, Ashtiro mintzatu duzueta, alaere es disut ulertu. You spoke slowly, and nevertheless I did not understand you. Eta seems like it is the ending of a clause, since it is followed by a comma or a pause, and you could assume that it means since. But in this case, it means and, since there is another part of the sentence to follow. Typically, if eta means since, you will find it at the very end of the sentence, or at least the very end of the entire thought. Maybe you could switch up this sentence and say, es disut ulertu, ashtiro mintzatu es dusueta, meaning, I did not understand you, since you did not speak slowly. However, if you see eta after verb formations ending in la or ela, in some sentence formations, this can be translated as because of or on account of. Hori dela eta, because of that reason. Se dela eta, why? On account of what? Uda gertu dagoela eta azala zaintzeko aholkuak. On account of summer being near, some advice to protect the skin. This concept is really tricky, especially if you don't know how la and ela constructs work. So don't worry about this too much if you're new to Basque. It's just fun grammar stuff. Eta can be simple, but it can also be confusing. If you see eta and the word and doesn't make sense, then it's probably not and. But don't get hung up on the confusion. Just keep these situations I've mentioned in mind, and you'll be practicing and getting it right in no time. Thanks for watching. Agur!